Welcome to the Rock Your Comeback podcast. I'm Nicole Eaton, author of the books Rock Your Soul and Rock Your Comeback, as well as an intuitive therapist, and I'm here to remind you of your power. This podcast focuses on mindset and inviting the universe in to create a life that feels so good, so aligned, and so authentic. I hope you're ready. Welcome back to another episode of the Rock Your Comeback podcast. I'm your host, Nicole Eaton, and I have been absolutely blessed with the guests I've had on this podcast lately. If you guys have been listening, it's just gem after gem after gem. And today is no different. It's somebody who has really personally impacted my life, somebody who I look up to. Today's guest is Justin Kavanaugh, better known as Coach Kav. He's the CEO of Athlete HQ, training over 50,000 athletes, including Olympians, MLB, and NFL All-Stars. He's the author of the best-selling book, Man Up, and helps athletes achieve their full potential through their body and mind. And I'm so fucking excited to have you today.
Me too. I'm super pumped to be on here.
You're somebody who just has such a massive, I talk a lot about energy, and you're somebody who just has a massive energy when you enter a room. I'm curious, and this is something I ask every single guest, what your definition of power is.
Interesting. I think your definition of a power is basically being able to create action from an intention.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of people that have intention, but we don't get judged by our intent. We get judged by our action. And actions is a lagging indicator of someone's intent. The power is the gap between those two factors.
I like it. I like it. I think it's interesting because I'm somebody who sets a lot of intentions and you're somebody who takes a lot of actions. For somebody who is stuck more in that intention space, how do you push people into action a little bit more so they can really make an impact in their lives?
I truly believe that most people have positive intentions and then they get stuck in that cycle of being very intentful, and then they get so stuck with the intention that they don't move. And I have learned over the years that most things that hit you in life are aiming for you, and it's a lot easier to hit a stationary target than a moving target. So the easiest way to get somebody out of their own way is to get them to move, because they'll stop being hit by the current bad problems that have the intention to hit them. So the first thing is basically, hey, you're getting hit right now. Why do you think that is? And they'll make a lot of external excuses instead of looking inside. But when they look inside and they realize that it's because they haven't moved anywhere, they're an easy target.
What's the biggest excuse you make?
Ooh, that's a great question. I probably, and I would say the best, I always tell everybody, like the best podcast would be interviewing their wife or their mother after the show and then have them calling BS on everything they said. So
what would your wife say right now?
She doesn't talk much, and that would be like a 5-hour podcast. So that would go great. I think the biggest excuse I make is holding other people to a standard that I don't set for myself. And then basically almost villainizing them for what they do when I have done the same thing 100 times. But because I am a very principled man, that one mistake stands out to me as a character issue. But yet the things I do for myself, I've justified it some way, shape, or form.
That was so honest. I really appreciate it.
Sucks. Yeah. It's not is this supposed to be a nice conversation? Thanks.
No. It's supposed to be a real conversation.
It's definitely real.
It's true though, because when we see other people, like things we don't like about other people, usually it's something that we're not sure of in ourselves. So I think that it's easier for us to be like, what the hell are they doing over there, than to look at our own shit, for sure.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think what happens is it's one of those things where it pierces through your veil quicker because you see it faster and you know where it's coming from. Remember, action's a lagging indicator, right? That action happened sometimes by mistake, but a lot of times their intention, to move forward with it was based upon something else that happened beforehand in their head.
You have like one of the most impressive resumes. I mean, I just listed off 95 things before I introduced you. Tell me a time before you were really known as Coach Kav.
Oh, I mean, it's also relative too, right? I'm not known at all in certain spaces. It's just that I've been able to leverage something that I've done very, very well at a deep level and have a lot of success at, and I've leveraged it in other environments. So every time I step into that environment, it looks impressive. But so I don't think I'm super well known right now. I would say most people that are listening to this, unless they're, friends of us at some capacity or have interacted with me in our audiences, they would have no idea who I am. So I'm not blind to the fact that even the most A-list celebrities they walk down the street and nobody knows who they are. But if you put them in their makeup and you put them in their costume, if you put them in their suit, they do look a certain way. And then people recognize them because they correlate them to that thing. But for me, my thing is this belief that says, if I am involved in an environment, I need to make a change. That's the definition of impact, whereas everybody likes to throw that word around. So if I'm not in that environment, then if the outcome is going to be the same, then what's the point of me even being there? So I remove myself from environments quite quickly if I don't feel like I actually am the change agent. So there was a lot of times where I wasn't known, but when I showed up, I had to become known. So even if it wasn't my name, it was a presence, it was a decision, and it was prioritizing those decisions so that the outcome was different than if I wasn't in the picture. So when I first started coaching, I was really young, and I was still in high school when I coached my first pro athlete. And that happened from trust. Athlete who I was training with, who was a friend of mine, said, Kav, I trust you, therefore you're training me. And he'd got pretty much taken advantage of by somebody that he had looked up to, who was his coach and also one of his managers and agents. They were stealing from him, which is still to this day very common. And I was put in a situation where, he trusted me. He goes, hey, if you're going to throw down and fight and have my back, then you'll be able to figure this out. And that was a wake-up call for me, because I realized that every relationship at that level started and ended with trust. Later on, when I would communicate with people that didn't know me, or I was early in the relationship and I was just getting to know them, where I had to like sell myself, it was picking up a phone and be like, hi, this is Justin Kavanaugh. Who cares? Click. Then it was interesting where it's like, ooh, my dad coaches. He was a firefighter, but he was an athlete and he coached in the area. So he was a little bit well recognized. So I was like, hi, this is Coach Kavanaugh. So that created a little bit of leverage. And then I had the opportunity to work with Nike for 5 years. And during that window, it was, hey, it's Coach Kavanaugh. Click. No one cared. Hey, it's Coach Kavanagh with Nike. Ooh. Then people started to have some interest. So I understood that that was a leverage point. Nike is a massive marketing company, and I was able to leverage that swoosh to help build. They brought me to the dance. So putting me in on a stage that gave me some recognition and pushing my name out there with a massive kind of entity behind them, it was like almost a tsunami into the industry for me. And that was the wave that I needed to kind of create the catalyst to change people's minds to listen. But I didn't know any more or less during that window. I was still the same person at the time, very kind of naively thinking that I was going to make the impact that I was going to make. But by just showing up every single day, the impact started to come because my competency grew. In the earlier stages, it was don't fuck it up. In my later stages, it was, hey, here's the direction to do this easier.
Yeah. You talked about knowing like what rooms you're walking in. How do you know what the right rooms? Like, how do you know when you walk in a room and you can make an impact?
If you pretend for a second that you're standing in a room and you're not facing the door, do you know when someone walks in? Of course. So there's 5 ways to identify dysfunction in the body. So my background's in biology with a concentration in neuroscience. I train the most elite athletes in the world. My job is to break down everything at the technical, tactical, and physical level, and then also psychological. My ways in which we do that, could be, so many different modalities. But when there's a dysfunction, where it's kind of like on the front end of a continuum, someone's about to get hurt, it is identifying the dysfunction. So there's 5 dysfunctions. You could have a neurological problem, you could have a muscular problem, you could have a skeletal problem, right? Or you could have a biochemical problem, right? Something internally, right? Blood, chemistry, whatever it may be. At the cellular level, those things are changing. The 5th one, which is the one that no one recognizes, is bioenergetics. This is where I think it separates certain coaches from everyone else, because these are the coaches that athletes know that you care. These are the coaches that athletes know that you're there. And for me, you stand in a room and you're not facing the door, you know that somebody walked in. The question is what type of spider crawl feeling did you get? Did you get the good ones or did you get the shitty ones? And that presence, right, happens when you're by yourself, not facing the door, and somebody walks in. But that presence is also with you all the time, that when you walk in, how do you show up? And how can you kind of control your aura at a capacity when you do show it? How are you going to make change? And then also when you show up, how does the external environment affect that? So I make those decisions quite quickly, which let's just pretend I am wrong all the time. What negative byproduct is that? I just remove myself from an environment. That means I remove myself from opportunities. I remove myself from potentially making tons of money. I remove myself some amazing, cool things I could have done, but I also remove myself from the risk that my gut tells me that's not a good place for me. And I would much trust that than I would be blindsided by something that looks shiny and fancy, because there's a lot of people blinded by that.
I love talking to high performers because they always mention intuition without mentioning intuition. And you just talked about intuition and auras for me, which I really appreciate. Are you somebody who's spiritual? Like, what impact does spirituality have on your life and your business?
Yeah, so it's interesting. In the introduction, you missed one of my most critical components to my philosophy. So it's mind, body, and spirit.
Well, shit.
And
I'll do that
spirit is
again.
probably the thing that drives everything. So I give you just a quick representation of what I do with an athlete so that you can understand where spirit lands and why it's the most critical foundational piece in all of the work that I do. So athletes come to me because they want to change their body. They understand that working with me is going to get them faster, stronger, and better performing for whatever there is that they're trying to accomplish. And training the body is really simple. All you have to do is you train, you fuel the body, and then you recover the body. And there's different mechanisms, whether it be nutritional, supplementations, environment, different training modalities. But that's all. People could argue that till they're blue in the face, but who cares? At the end of the day, the results are what matters. So that's training. Right. That's the body. But what makes the fastest change in a human? Is it their body? Right. Like the physiological change to a cell changing and the muscles breaking down and then having to recover, or the mind? The mind. So they come to me for the body. And the first way that I could get them to buy in is by training the mind. So we do that with what we call as our mic, right? The microphone. And it's the way that you show up your voice to the world. So M stands for mastery. Every person needs to have a level of mastery. And we break that down into super small components, just like we're dealing with skill acquisition. So a singular component within the work that you're trying to develop, you develop a level of mastery. Then the next level is image. Image is your self-image. It's how you view yourself. It's your mirror. And the reason why that's the next piece is because your image is going to be attached to how good you are, a level of self-awareness to the mastery skill that you're trying to develop. Last is confidence. Confidence is how other people perceive you. And you always will fall back on going in reverse. So your confidence is stemmed from your self-image. Your self-image is stemmed from your self-awareness attached to your level of skill. So that's your mind. And that's the fastest way you can make a change in the human body. Because if I could commit the body and the mind to something, the mind will move. Right. And then the body will move after, but you have to first move here. And then lastly, it's spirit. And that's the fundamental principle to understand that the root cause, how people stay with you. People come to you for your body. They make the first initial change because of their mind, and they stay with you forever because of the spirit. And spirit is really simple. People need to have passion. At the end of the day, if you don't wake up excited about the work that you're doing, that's problematic. They need to have purpose. So now we're going from to the external world, how we see them move, to the internal part of their soul, why they are doing it, right? So they go to the core of who they are. That's their purpose. And then the last P is principles. Along the path, there's going to be opportunities and options for you to cut corners that are slightly outside the standard of excellence that you think that you want to kind of, operate with. So what do? You got to figure out, where you're willing to cut corners. And principles go both ways, right? Are you willing to interact with people at a level of character that are not aligned with your principles or your values? Or are you willing to do things, at that level or not? So when people come to us, those are the components in which we're trying to develop. And then what ends up happening is you can immediately see externally their drive, someone's internal drive, how fast, how hard, how willing are they to push, how resilient are they? Their sense of calm. This is peak state. When you're an athlete and you're kind of, when you're in that batter's box and it's a full count and the game's on the line, like your peak state is your flow, right? This is when time does not exist. It's the absence of time. Doesn't matter if it's short or long, it collapses because you're just present. And when you're just present, you could really be your full self. And that's a state of calm. That's what every parent wants for their kid. And the overlap between body and mind and spirit is character. And that character component is going to stay with you through the test of time. And these are all the fundamental principles of how I teach. It's also kind of where my model has been broken over the years, because if we had gaps in each or any one of these areas, we fell short as a coach. So these became our key identifiers on how we show up as a coaching staff, and as well as how our athletes end up performing.
This is so good. I think this is going to help a lot of people, because I think everything you talked about is really accessible for people who aren't high performing athletes. I think all of these things of considering, how am I cutting corners in my life or with my relationships, or what are the core characteristics of who I am? Am I bringing that into every room? I want to switch gears really quick. You mentioned your dad. Your dad was a coach. Mm-hmm. What are some things that you've learned from your dad?
Don't be an asshole. Doesn't get you very far. But I would say probably the biggest lesson that stuck with me my entire life is when you find yourself in a hole, stop digging. We are our own problems and we are our own solutions, but we don't get out of our own way because we keep digging our own holes. So if you find yourself in a situation that you don't like, don't just bury yourself in there. So there's two things that end up happening. The first thing is that you kind of wallow in your sorrows, you bitch, moan, and you complain, and then you just spiral and spin into a deep hole of depression. And the second thing is you do nothing. But the first thing you have to do before you do nothing is stop doing the thing that got you there. So sometimes doing nothing is a good thing. You just can't stay there very long. And I think that a lot of times people see people that look like they're lazy. You know, in today's generation, we've seen a lot of people that haven't moved very fast out of tough situations. But there is a place in a period for pause, and that window of pause, right? The longer that you're in that pausing moment, the worse things will be because you're staying in the place that you don't want to be. The whole purpose of pause is to have a better perspective. But if you don't move, then your perspective doesn't change, and then the environment moves past you, which means that you're in a delayed perspective. But if you pause for a second, kind of recalibrate your perspective, then you could actually make a change. So probably the greatest lesson is when you find yourself in a hole, stop digging.
I want to know about maybe the deepest hole you've been in.
Oof. The easy one is I broke my back, which is what ended my career. I fell 25 feet through a roof and broke L4, L5, T1, compression fractures, and was perfectly fine and woke up the next morning and could barely even talk, because if I did, what would happen is as my lungs would expand, it would push back into the back of my spine and it would lock me up. So one of the most humbling experiences is having my dad carry me to the bathroom so I didn't piss on myself. But that wasn't probably the worst part about it, right? The deeper the hole is that I became very self-deprecating, and I thought it was part of my kind of comic relief. Now, what that was is an identity crisis. It was an identity crisis going from an all-American athlete to a 5-sport, kid that had, opportunities to play college sports and then had, pro aspirations to, I can't walk.
Right.
Easy for me at a young coaching age to basically say, hey, I need you to jump on that box that's 30 to 40 inches high. And well, how do I do it, coach? And I just jumped on the box because I was, that guy, to I can't even walk. So to take an identity that was baked into who I was at the core level of just do, right? Ready, fire, then aim, to, our aiming is going to take, we have to be very critical about how much time we spend aiming, because if we're not, we're going to misstep because we didn't have that many steps left in us. And that was an identity crisis. So I removed myself from my environment is what I did. I grew up in Dade County in Miami, Florida, in an area that I had probably the most fun, most luxury lifestyle, but didn't know any better because when I left and when I came back and you realize, I grew up here. Well, it's a little different than what I thought. I had the best time growing up, but I would never put my family and my kids in that environment today. Yet I had a blast. So it's amazing how much you change a little bit, perspective when you see different parts of the world. However, I know I needed to get out of there because that was comfortable for me. And I needed to kind of change my own story because everyone identified me as this guy that was just going to get it done, to a point where I couldn't, even if I tried.
Right.
So I needed to reestablish that. I knew that my body would break down before my mind would. So I had to reestablish what my mind was telling myself, get myself out of that environment. And that's why I actually moved. I tell people I moved because of business opportunities. I tell people I moved because of job opportunities that came up and relationships and whatever it may be. But the reality is I moved because I was constantly being identified with a person that was my past. And I was going to never be able to graduate from that person, since that person to that world retired. But to myself, I was still that guy. So I had to almost invent him.
How do you rewrite a new identity? Do you think it always takes moving somewhere to rewrite your identity, or can someone do that in the same environment?
Yeah, my mission is, I tell people we want to live your telos, which is man's higher purpose. But in sport, I want to rewrite history in sport. So, there's record books, there's seasons. I want to rewrite the history. Someone hasn't been able to do it. We want to do it. That's my belief. And I've been able to do that in a number of different sports. And I've had athletes at the highest level in so many different capacities that I have a lot of pride in that. However, the way that you rewrite history is understanding that you could change your yearbook today. And people go, how is that possible? Well, it's really simple. If you change today, just like they say, planting a tree, the best time to do it was 10 years ago. And the next best time is right now. Well, if you change that moment right now, you actually do change your yearbook. So at the high school level, what does your yearbook say? What does the 9th grade Nicole look like? What does the 10th grade sophomore Nicole look like? What does the junior in you look like? What was when you go back and you look at that yearbook and you see a picture of you, you go, man, I remember where I was mentally, emotionally in that state. What does the senior girl about to, go to college and take on over the world look like? Because that girl thought she would be in a very different place in her life than she actually ended up just a number of years later in college. So how did you rewrite history? Well, you made a change. Some of those changes were intentional. Some of them were planned out and some of them were not planned out. That doesn't mean that they're not going to be an amazing story, but understand that you have the majority of the control, and your decisions, create action, and that action has some sort of a repercussion, as an output. And sometimes those are the greatest blessings that we don't look at. And in order to realize that we are in charge, we can control ourselves. We could control our attitude and our effort on a daily basis. And if we show up with a level of attitude and we show up with a level of effort that is in alignment with our ambition, somehow, some way, things tend to work out. What happens is we become very negative towards our own ambition. And the people that are closest to us normally are the ones that hold us back. They're not going to be the naysayers, but they are going to be the governors a little bit of that engine that's driving. So they slow us down a little bit. See, unfortunately, most people are not willing to move as fast as you. So when you're trying to rewrite history, there's got to be a massive change. It's not as easy to do when you're doing incremental adjustments. So you have to make a massive change. And that shift also comes with a bit of a shift in perspective to the people outside of you. So the closer they are to you, normally the more they hold you back.
I think the biggest changes I've made in my life have made the biggest change in me. So I absolutely hear what you're saying and agree. Even just jumping from a traditional counseling job to open my own business, or moving from New York to South Carolina. And at the time, if I look back, they didn't always really make sense for me to do. They weren't the logical thing for me to do, but I felt that calling to do them. And not only did it change, my life, but it personally just changed who I am and how I function in the world. And some of those things I had to start over with, making friends and silly little things that I had to rediscover who I am and what I'm really interested in terms of who I'm surrounding myself with. So I completely agree. I want to go back to that space where you're not able to walk, you just been injured, you're using self-deprecating humor, lost your sense of who you are. For somebody out there who has had such a major change, they've lost a role in their life, like their kids just left for college, or I'm wondering what steps you took to get out of your own pity party and back in your power.
Yeah, I think you have to go back to where you had the most success in your life, because it becomes you're attaching something that's uncomfortable with something that's already comfortable, but in a positive way. So I give you an example to that. And this is what's worked for me. Being hurt was new to me. Getting to the point where I couldn't move and not being athletic and having this identity crisis was new to me. It was something I never experienced. So I had to go back to what was something that I was good at. I was really, really good at persistence. I was really, really good at having and developing a level of resilience. And I was really, really good at building relationships. So I had to go back to that, because the person that was showing up was not good at that. The person that was being self-deprecating, the person that was joking around about it, the person that was basically being like, F the world, that person, not only did nobody like, but I didn't have value anymore. It's one thing to be a dick if you're good. It's a whole different thing to be a jerk and you suck, right? You can't be bad at your job and be a jerk. But if you're good at your job, it's I kind of have to put up with them a little bit depending on what it is. And I've kind of created a little bit of that MO. That's just my that's a little bit in my model of how I show up in the world as a coach. No one complains that Nick Saban's a jerk sometimes. He gets results. And yet if you go to act like that, people go, oh, why are you acting like that? Well, I'm trying to be like that. Well, you're not that guy. So that's an identity crisis. Well, I was a jerk and I wasn't good. That's not good either, right? So, if you watch the show Dr. House, right? House is only acceptable because he's one of the smartest guys that's figuring shit out. But if he was dumb, he would just be a homeless guy, right? It wouldn't be a good show. But the fact that there's genius in that experience, right? Just like you need to find the genius in the crazy. I had to go back to what I was good at fundamentally. I was good at building relationships. I was good at having resilience, and I was good at being very persistent, because with persistence is going to be coming those problems. And I was good at overcoming that. So I needed to go back to that, because I wasn't good at being an athlete anymore. It was very easy to visually see what I was capable of. And in this environment right now, I wasn't able to. So So there's a saying in business, what gets you there what gets you from point A to point B won't get you from point B to point C. But sometimes when you're in that kind of J to K part of the alphabet, or you're a little bit later, you may need to go back to your roots a little bit to realize who you are and have the same foundational principles, and then kind of skip level and use the same strategies and tactics that helped you get to that point, and just change what those things are, change the technical component, even though it's the same strategy. So for me, I do the same thing now with business owners. I take the same strategies and tactics that help athletes, in the board, with executives in the boardrooms. So if athletes are going to be successful at the Olympic podium level or in the pro contract level, executives could be successful in the boardroom. And those same tactics work no matter where you are if you're a high performer. What changes is the technical component. We're not talking about running and lifting in performance. We're talking about performance in their life. So how do we parlay these skills that we develop? But I always had to go back. I had to kind of pause, reflect, and go, hey, I don't like who I am. But if you don't have ownership on liking who you are, it's going to just be very problematic.
I love that idea of pausing. That's something that's come up with a good friend of mine, Heather, when it comes to eating and nutrition, of just pausing before you make choices. I think that's a really powerful thing to get you in the present moment, so you can kind of assess, like, what am I doing? Where is this going? So I love that you're kind of using that across all of the, places in your life. What's something that you're most proud of?
Oh, I mean, hands down, it's my son. He's 6 years old. It's the thing that I'm the most proud of. I mean, he's incredible. It's watching God bless me for reasons that I don't even know, but means I did something right. Right. So, I mean, you always think that you want to, provide a better life than your parents provided for you. And that's hard because I had a wonderful childhood with experiences that I don't necessarily want to go back to, but I sure as hell don't want to provide them for my son, some of them, which is what made me the man I am today. But my wife has a unique ability to not go back to the way she was in her childhood. And I have that same ability. And we're kind of instilling the same values, which made us who we are, without having them to go through the same hurdles and headaches that we went through to get there. And watching that every single day, watching him be way more kind than I am, watching him, would be a little bit too intelligent sometimes, since I'm, at the short end of that stick when it comes to his jokes and his humor, but also watching the change every single day to me is so fascinating, because what I've found is that I show up and he is so kind of aware of our energy that it creates a really, really cool coaching environment for me. And it's fascinating because early when he was born, we went through a major issue in business that changed my emotional state on a daily basis on how I needed to show up. And I remember pulling up to the apartment, and right before I went into the apartment, I did a quick prayer and I just got rid of all the bad juju I had on me, because I knew I was in a bad environment, and I knew I couldn't get out of that environment for about 3 to 6 months. And coming from somebody who believes that environment always wins, that environment will absorb you and take you to the top, but they'll also consume you and drag you down. Someone who believes that and knows that you have to kind of stick it out to get past it. And I realized I had to have enough resilience because it was going to make me a better man. And I didn't want to even be there, but I had to do it. And I had to accept that I'm not only going to stick this out because it's going to make me better, but I had to learn to appreciate the environment that I hated being in, because it was going to make me better. So I was grateful for it. And I had to learn to love it. That was hard. But one of the things I did right before I showed up is I can't show up like that for my family. So I got rid of all that energy, and that stayed there. I punted that. That was gone. And I was like, hey, I had to learn, because I'm a big integration guy. I'm not a work-life balance guy. I'm a big work-life integration. I'm always on. But I had to learn to compartmentalize, which was one of the hardest things for me. And that hands down is the thing I'm the most proud of, because it's a daily challenge. It's not an award that I could put up as a picture frame and be like, that was cool once. This is always going on. And that's my purpose in life. So I don't ever want a plaque for that. What I want is be able to watch that, be present and watch that actually grow up and mature.
There's so many people that are in toxic environments that know that they have to be there for an extended amount of time or for the next 6 months or whatever the case may be. And I think there's somebody listening who really needed to hear that message, that finding gratitude and managing your energy inside of that, I think, is so vital for your success, and who you are when you get out of it. And, just as a parent, I hear that the kids don't let anything slide. They're well aware, and they're always responding and reacting to the energy you bring into the house. And that's something that's also been very essential to me, is how I show up for my kids. So I love that it sounds like your son kind of softened you a little bit.
Oh, everybody will tell me they're like, he ain't gonna change. He's stubborn, blah, 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 blah. There's no doubt that I've changed. There's no doubt that people have seen the change. I know the change. I feel the change. There's a funny moment we had about a few months ago, which I'm not a morning person. So, being in the fitness and performance space, everyone's like, man, if you don't pop out of bed, put your feet on the ground and have a purpose in your life, then you're a loser. And I'm like, dude, if you saw me every day in the morning, you would think that I would be a loser, because there ain't no mojo coming out of the bed. I am in the morning, and I have a purpose. I have a drive, but I am a slow starter. I need to, I think I can. I need to get over that hump. I know I got to get over that hump to get to some momentum. And that's just how I operated. And Thomas doesn't really like me in the morning. To be honest, he's not my favorite fan in the morning. And he said one of the funniest things. We sat down at breakfast. I said, man, why don't you like me in the morning? And he goes, Daddy, you don't even like yourself in the morning.
That's
and
fair.
That right there might have been the reality check I needed. And
Yeah.
It was one of the funniest things. That was the most of the things that are funny in life are honest. And that was one of the most honest things that someone had told me. And it came from the thing that I listened to the most, my son.
Yeah, kids don't hold back with that kind of stuff either. That's for sure. I've loved this conversation with you, Kav. This has been insightful. I think it's been helpful for everybody listening. Do you have any last pieces of advice for anybody who's wanting to do more in their life, wanting to feel more in their life, wanting to get back on track? What would you tell them?
Yeah, I would say this. I think at the superficial level, if you want to have a shallow conversation with people, focus on the results. You brought up my resume, which I have a lot of pride in, because everybody, when you're younger, like, I want to accomplish X, right? And yeah, I've worked with Nike. Yeah, going on my 6th Olympic cycle, going to Paris, came back from Tokyo with 3 golds and 2 silvers, world championships, over 30, world championships at different sport levels, been in the NFL, combine space and pro sports for over 20 years. Yeah, that's a hell of a resume. I am a baby. I'm just getting started. If you think that's impressive, I'm not stopping. I'm going to keep going. And there's my ego, and I'm going to tell that to the world. But if you really want to have just a shallow, superficial conversation, focus on that. Focus on the results, because results are, when people say like, why this? Because it's tangible. It's seen. That's what everyone's looking at. That's a very shallow way to look at things. But if you want to go deeper, the results are just above the surface. That's what people can see. That's the top of the iceberg. The resiliency that you build is underneath the water. And it's because when someone goes to work with you, they think, why now? Well, it's because it's intangible. They can see it, they can measure it. There's evidence, there's a timeline to what we're trying to accomplish. This is the resiliency that you're going to build. And as you go deeper in that conversation, beyond resilience with people, we're trying to work on the relationship. And the reason why is because they're saying, why choose you? Why me? If it's a matter of like, why do I need this in my life? That's results based. If it's a matter of, the next level, it's why now? Like, why am I committed to make this change? Is it because I listen to this podcast or I'm around a certain situation? It's still very intangible, versus what we're trying to look at. Now, the difference is why did you choose to work with me? And it's because it's a transformational experience. It's the idea that you can't really see the difference. You can't really measure the difference, but you could feel the difference and it's there. So if you really want to have deep conversations with people, then you have to think about it at the relationship level. All the other stuff is results based. All the other stuff is how much can you endure? But if you really want to make change, you're going to make change at the relationship level, and the relationship first starts with you.
I want to know what your soul's craving next. What's next for not just results wise, but what's next?
Food. I'm freaking always hungry. Tell your emotional eating coach to talk to me, because I'm always hungry and I'm cranky. So I am absolutely craving so much recognition that as a byproduct, you take care of my kid when I'm gone. And the recognition is not external exposure to the world. The recognition is from each individual people. So they don't, you screw me all you want. That's fine. You feel good at night. You sleep good at night because you acted a certain way out of character. That's not going to give me an excuse to act out of alignment with my beliefs, but you'll have to sit with that. But I want to basically do so right by you that when I'm gone, you're going to take care of the people I care about and love. That's all I care about, which I'll never know if that actually happens or not. But I believe that in my actions, I have a funny feeling that it will set the deck, and it will set the deck in my favor.
So legacy.
That's it.
Energetic legacy, really.
Of course. Yeah.
Oh, I love it. I know people are going to want to follow you, connect with you. What's the best way to have them do that?
Coach Kav on Instagram, KAV. If you're online and you want to look, the business up, it's athletehq.com. You could see kind of the work that we do at the elite level with athletes and the elite level with executives. But, the best thing that you could do in this moment, if there's some value out of it, is support the people I care about. So you give Nicole a review, on a podcasting platform, and you just reference one thing that you learned from this episode. And that's the thing that I will see. And I'll be more than happy to support you in any way I can if you support the people I care about. It's the easiest way through it without having to pay a financial currency. Currency in life, I think most people think about it as money, but the reality is the strongest currency is in the relationship currency. And that's basically taking care of the people that you care about.
I'm so grateful for you. Thank you so much for coming on today. This has been so wonderful.
Me too. I had a blast. Thank you so much.
Thanks for listening. Make sure to get a copy of my latest book, Rock Your Comeback, The Down-to-Earth Guide to Reclaiming Your Power, just about everywhere books are sold. Join the Comeback Club for exclusive access, masterclasses, and more. And I always love to know what you think, so make sure to shoot me a DM or leave me a review. Thanks for listening to the Rock Your Comeback podcast. I hope you're feeling inspired, motivated, and ready to take on the world. Now go step back into your power. The world's been waiting for you. But first, if you could, leave me a review or share with a friend. Thank you.